Hello and welcome to this OECD discussion about the future of vocational education and training. I'm Duncan Crawford, a senior editor at the OECD's Education Directorate. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Today we're going to be looking into our crystal balls to discuss the challenges that vocational education and training, VET or VET for short, will face in the years ahead. What are the challenges? Well, of course, there are a lot of them. The world is shifting to greener production methods. There's the rise of artificial intelligence, and automation, of course, is taking over in certain workplaces, or at least it will do in the decades to come. So how are vocational schemes and programs going to keep up with all of this? What policies are needed to ensure VET systems will support young people and adults to find secure jobs in the decades ahead? The recent flagship OECD publication, Education at a Glance, had a focus on VET this year. It was released just last month, and certainly that has some of the answers, as do other OECD reports on the subject, including a report called Building Future-Ready VET Systems. You can check those out on the OECD website. I recommend you have a good read of them. Now, though, to tell you more about the future of vocational education and training programs, we have a fantastic array of speakers and guests as well today. From the OECD, I am joined by Abel Schumann, a senior analyst who led the work on the Education at a Glance report. Also joining us today, Małgorzata Kukzera, an OECD analyst who worked on the Building Future-Ready VET Systems report. And from the European Commission, Anna Carreri, Deputy Head of a unit that works on employment. We also have an extensive list of panelists who will join us later on in this webinar. We'll get to them in a bit. But first of all, let's start off with Abel, who's going to give some insights into that recent Education at a Glance report. Over to you, Abel.
Hello, Duncan. Hello, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here on this webinar, and I'm going to use the next 10 minutes to present key insights on vocational education and training from Education at a Glance. For those of you who don't know Education at a Glance, it's an annual publication that the OECD releases, and it's a compendium on key facts and data on all parts of the education system. And as Duncan already mentioned, this year had a focus on vocational education and training. So let me jump right in. I'm going to share my screen. Just a second. Okay, I hope everyone can see my screen. And I would like to start my presentation just pointing out one very important key fact. When we look at the relationship between the strength of vocational education and training systems of countries and labor market outcomes, we really see that there's a clear positive relationship. So what we see on this particular chart is on the horizontal axis, we see the share of vocational students among students in upper secondary programs. And on the vertical axis, we see the employment rate. And what we see is that there's a clear positive relationship, meaning countries that have a higher share of vocational students also tend to have higher employment rates among young adults. Now, the relationship is obviously not perfect, but it's nevertheless a clear positive relationship. Now, that, of course, raises the question, if we have this positive influence of vocational education and training on labor market outcomes, why don't we see more young people choosing vocational education and training programs? And when we look at the share of young adults, 25 to 34-year-olds, that have a vocational qualification at highest level of attainment, what we see is that this share is actually relatively small. So here we see the share of young adults that have an upper secondary vocational qualification. This is what we typically consider a traditional vocational degree. And in many countries, this just ranges between 10 or 20% of the population of young adults. Even if we add to this the share of young adults that have a post-secondary non-tertiary vocational qualification, these are typically programs that people do after they complete a first general upper secondary degree, normally a general high school degree. That fraction remains still quite low. And even if we include those that have a tertiary vocational qualification, normally short university or higher education programs that last 2 years or shorter, we see that in most countries that share is the share of young adults that have such a qualification taken together is less than 30%. And when we look at the reasons behind this, what we see is actually that even though there's this positive relationship between labor market outcomes and the strength of vocational systems, is that from an individual perspective, vocational education and training does not always serve young people best. And we see this along a range of different key measures. So, for example, we can look at the relative wages of earners that have a vocational upper secondary degree and compare them to those with of workers with a tertiary, meaning a university qualification. And what we see is that in the EU, on average, young adults, 25 to 34-year-olds with a vocational upper secondary qualification, they just earn 75% on average of the earnings that young adults with a tertiary, with a university qualification have. And what is even worse, so to speak, is when we look at how the earnings evolve over the lifetime, and when we now compare the earnings of 45 to 54-year-olds, we see that the earnings gap is even larger. So 45 to 54-year-olds with a vocational qualification, they only earn approximately 2/3 of what 45 to 54-year-olds with a tertiary qualification earn. And the reason for this is essentially that the salary increase that workers observe throughout their career tends to be lower for vocational workers than for tertiary workers. Another important aspect to consider are completion rates. What we see here are the share of of students within vocational upper secondary programs that complete their programs on time. And we see that in many countries, only between 50 and 70% of all vocational upper secondary students complete their programs on time. And when we compare this to the completion rates among students in general programs, we see that there's really a clear gap. Typically, students in general programs have much higher completion rates, often being in the range between 70 and 90%. So one of the key issues to make vocational education more attractive is to ensure that more students in those programs actually have the opportunity to complete those programs. Another important aspect is to ensure the transition from school to work. Now, initially I said that vocational education has positive effects on labor market outcomes, but when we dig down a little bit deeper, we still see that there's a sizable share of graduates from vocational programs that struggles to find a job. We see that roughly 15% of graduates from vocational upper secondary programs are neither in education, nor in training, nor in a job between 1 and 3 years after they have graduated from their program. And that is actually a fraction which is much higher than the corresponding fraction of young adults that completed a general upper secondary program. Now, I think here it's important to emphasize, of course, that many people that completed a general upper secondary program are likely to move on into tertiary education. So for them, the difficulty of finding a job is usually only after they have finished their tertiary studies. But nevertheless, the numbers show that there is a clear need to improve the transition from school to work in some vocational programs. Now, what can be done to make vocational education and training more attractive? We also have a few key statistics on this in education at a glance. One key issue that we know is very important is actually work-based learning. And this is one of the key advantages of vocational programs, that they have the possibility to integrate work-based learning into those programs. But when we look actually at the data, we see that in many, many countries in the EU and across the entire OECD, work-based learning is incredibly rare. So in countries like Sweden, Estonia, Belgium, Bulgaria, or Spain, the fraction of students enrolled in vocational programs that combine school and work-based learning is below 10%. And when we on the opposite side of the chart, when we look at countries like Switzerland, Germany, that we know have very strong vocational systems, we see that there all or virtually all vocational students are enrolled in programs that combine school and work-based learning. Now, the good news here is that when we actually look at the evolution over time and compare that to the share of students that were enrolled in these combined school and work-based programs in 2015, we see actually an increase in work-based learning. So many countries are undertaking efforts to strengthening work-based learning in vocational programs, and that is reflected in an increase of roughly 8 percentage points on average across the EU in the share of students enrolled in work-based learning between 2015 and 2021. Another very important aspect is the possibility to continue learning and to continue studying after completing a first vocational program. And for that, it is important that all vocational programs offer the possibility to enter higher learning. Usually this means higher education, university education, or other higher education institutions. But again, we see that there are many vocational programs that do not offer this transition from upper secondary vocational education into higher education and into tertiary education. So across the EU, on average, only 70% of vocational students are enrolled in programs that offer this direct transition into higher education. And what also needs to be said is what we can show in our data is actually the fraction of students that have the formal opportunity to move on from a vocational upper secondary program into a tertiary program. But we do not know anything about whether those vocational programs actually provide the qualifications that are required to succeed in a tertiary program, so to succeed in university studies. And what we also do not know is whether tertiary education actually offers the appropriate programs that build on the particular skills that vocational graduates have, so that they are well suited for vocational graduates to continue their studies. So these are all aspects that need to be considered, and the key maxim here should really be that no vocational program should be a dead end, and all graduates need to have the opportunity to continue studying. Another important aspect that I would like to flag is gender disparities. When we look at overall gender ratios in vocational programs, we see that at upper secondary level, women tend to be underrepresented with roughly 40% of all students. But of course, this is the average across all different fields of studies. So if we were now to show the gender ratios across the individual fields of studies, we would, of course, see much larger gender disparities going both ways. So having both men and women underrepresented depending on the particular field of study. And reducing those gender stereotypes, these gender biases would go a long way to making some programs more attractive for one or the other gender. Now, when we look at the same gender ratios at short cycle tertiary level, so at higher education level, we see that there, on average, there is not so much of a clear gender bias, but what we see here is that this situation fluctuates strongly from country to country. And in some countries, it's women that are overrepresented. In other countries, it's men that are overrepresented. Okay, and with this, I'm already almost at the end of my presentation. I would just like to highlight one more important aspect, and that is funding, because we all know that a high level of funding is not a guarantee for a good education system, but it's very hard to offer a good education without sufficient funding. And what we see when we look at the data and compare total expenditure per full-time equivalent student in general and in vocational programs, we see that in most countries, expenditure in vocational programs, which we see here on the light green bar, tends to be significantly higher than expenditure per student in general programs. And the reason for this is largely that vocational education tends to be more expensive than general education due to the costs of equipment and infrastructure that is needed to provide this kind of education. But what we also see that there are some countries where actually the picture is the opposite. For example, Slovenia, where expenditure on vocational education is lower than on general education, and in general relatively low by compared to many other countries. Now, with this, I'm at the end of my presentation, and I'm of course very happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Abel. Absolutely fascinating. And I can tell you there are questions flying in, absolutely loads of them. Unfortunately, we're already over time. There's no time to take the questions live. A reminder to the other participants, please do stick to time, because we've got such a packed panel of guests who are set to join us as well, and we haven't got all day for this webinar. So, Abel, I'll leave you to have a look at the webinar chat and to answer some of the questions there. For now, though, if you let's learn some more about the OECD's work on VAT, and let's turn to Małgorzata Kruczera. Małgorzata, over to you.
Thank you so much, Duncan, and good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening. I can see that we have guests from all continents, so it's fantastic to see you all. So we've heard from Abel about indicators we are collecting on vocational education and training, which are very important. And now I'm going to tell you what we do with these indicators, how we're trying to explain the differences we can see. So I'm going to talk about vocational education and training policy. So let me share my screen with you. Right. Can you see it? I guess that it's, if Duncan is not protesting, it means that everything is fine. So I'm going to talk today about our recent publication, which is called Building Future Ready Vet Systems. So just a few words about how we work. So at the OECD, we've been working on vocational education and training for more than 10 years. You can see the countries we've worked already. And so in addition to country studies, we are also doing a lot of analytical work, data analysis. And the report I'm going to talk about today presents the results of our work and findings in the last couple of years. So what this report is about, as the title says, is about the future. So how can you make your vocational education and training systems ready for future challenges? And there are a couple of them. The first one, there is an issue of automation, which means that jobs are getting automated, people might be replaced, and blue-collar skilled, semi-skilled occupations are particularly concerned. And these jobs are often associated with vocational education and training, so VET might be particularly concerned by the issue of automation. Another closely related topic is about increasing demand for complex skills. So what should be the answer of vocational education and training that traditionally was preparing for the labor market only? Finally, we have also an issue of aging. And this is something that we see across nearly all OECD countries. So the population is aging. The demand in some sectors, such as healthcare, elderly care, is increasing. And at the same time, the demand for retraining and upskilling of adults is rising too. And then we have also the green transition, which means that countries are aiming to meet green objectives to stop global warming. So what does it mean for that? It means that in some occupations, such as in sectors related to mining, employment might shrink. In some other sectors, such as in construction and manufacturing, we might see that technology is going to change and people will need to retrain to be able to use these technologies, and vocational programs will need to adapt to prepare labor force in these specific occupations. So how we are addressing these challenges in our report. So first of all, we look how vocational education and training can be aligned with the labor market needs. We look at the issue of flexibility and inclusiveness. So the population that is targeted by vocational education and training is very diverse and is getting more and more diverse. So we have young people, we have adults looking for retraining, and now we have also more and more young people and adults who are looking for upskilling and continuing to higher education. So the question is how vocational education and training can respond to these very diverse demands. The third topic is about transition, and this is closely related to the issue of flexibility. So the demand for complex skills is rising, and the demand from young people and their parents for higher education is increasing too. So what should be the role of VET? Should VET provide pathways to higher education? These are some of the questions I'm going to talk about. And finally, it's about innovation. So about using new technologies in training, in educating. So let's jump into the first question, which is about the responsiveness. So I'm sure that this is not a surprise to you. Involvement of social partners, including employers and employees, is key in vocational education and training, and it will be key in the future. So here on this chart, just very quickly, I'm showing what's usually the division of role. So what's the role of the state, of public authority and social partners. So since we are short of time, I'm not going to discuss it in more detail. And we'll discuss directly an example from Denmark. So in fact, involving social partners can be very challenging. This is the comment that we hear from many countries saying, oh, we know that is important, but we don't know how to do this. So Denmark provides a very nice example of how it can be organized. So in Denmark, social partners are involved at all levels where VET policy is taking place. They are part of National Advisory Council, advising the minister on various aspects of VET. What you see in the middle, these sectoral trade committees, there are 50 of them, and they play a key role in vocational education and training. They supervise all 160 vocational programs. They might say, oh, we need a new qualification, or we need to update the existing one. They also check if companies providing work-based learning have all the facilities, have trainers. So they are really key, and they are doing a great job in Denmark. And finally, we have local training committees. So these are also employer and employees organization, and they work very closely with individual institutions. What helps in Denmark that vocational colleges are relatively large, so it's easy to establish such partnerships. It might be quite different in systems where you have a lot of very small providers. It might be a little bit more complicated to establish such a partnership. A quick point on the meeting local labor market needs. So here you have two examples of Australia and Sweden. So I'm going to discuss a third one. It's about Finland. So in Finland, some qualifications or units of qualifications are defined locally and provided locally. And this helps to address local labor market needs. As you know, they might differ quite a lot within one country, especially if the country is quite large. So now I'm moving to the second issue about flexibility. So how to address needs of very diverse populations. So here you can see what's the average age of upper secondary VET students, and you can see that it's very different. So on the left-hand side, typically you have countries where VET caters mainly to young people, and on the right-hand side to young people, but also to adults. So what we see in many countries that actually this demand for retraining and upskilling of adults is growing. So how this can be done? So we've noticed that breaking down qualifications into units or modules can be very helpful. Why this is helpful? It's because, first of all, a person can have a more individualized approach, take things that are interesting and necessary on the labor market. And the second thing, it can be more efficient. So if someone drops out from education, after some time, they can think, oh, actually, I would like to complete my studies. And when they go back, they don't need to start from the beginning. They can start where they stopped. So this will be, of course, cheaper for the person and cheaper for the taxpayer. There are, of course, it can be a little bit more complicated to provide this kind of qualifications. As for the providers, it will be more challenging. And you also need quite a lot of investment in career guidance, because having this kind of individualized approach might be a little bit more challenging. A person might not know how to combine all these units and all these modules so as it makes sense. So now I'm going to the third issue. It's about supporting transition. So you've seen this chart already in the Abel's presentations, just with different colors. So what I'm interested in now, it's the bars in red and in blue, which shows share of young adults with what we call higher technical education or post-secondary non-tertiary. That's quite a mouthful term. So these qualifications correspond to ISCAD level 4 and 5 or EQF 4 and 5. So why am I talking about it? Because they are quite important for upskilling, and more countries get interested in expanding this sector of vocational education. So as I said, how you can use this higher technical vocational education? You can use it for upskilling. So if you look at Finland, there are, for example, what they call a specialist vocational qualification, which are at EQF 5 or ISCAD level 5. And they are for those adults who have extensive work experience. So you cannot start it right after. If you are young, no work experience, you will be admitted. So it's very specific purpose. In some other countries, such as in Denmark, you will have both. You will have qualifications that are for those with work experience, but also for people who want to start a new career. And finally, it's more and more higher technical vocational education is used also to provide pathways to university. Since, as you know, traditionally VET was not preparing for higher education, and this is a challenge. This was a challenge in many countries. I can see that Duncan is already there, which means that I should probably finish shortly. Is that right, Duncan?
Up to you.
Right. So maybe just the last chart. I have two more charts. It's on innovation. So we've done a survey in 3 countries, and the survey was addressed to VET institutions. So here you can see actually which type of technologies tend to be used in these 3 countries. So what I will do, I will just jump quickly to the last slide, a very colorful one. So here you can see I indicated here the obstacles to more efficient use of technologies. So for each technology, you have 2 main reasons why these technologies are not used more effectively. So as you can see a lot of the red color, which means that one of the main reasons is lack of sufficient knowledge among teachers. You can see a couple of rectangles, the blue ones. This is about lack of financial resources, and it's not surprising to see that it's especially when we look at very expensive technologies like robots, virtual reality, and digital examination. So I think I'm going to stop now since we are running short of time. So if you are interested in all these topics, please have a look at our report, or you can drop me also a message and I would be happy to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Małgorzata. Very interesting indeed. Thank you for that presentation. So we've heard a lot about the OECD's work on VET. Now let's get a European perspective. Anna Carreru from the European Commission. Let's go straight over to you. And we are roughly around halfway through this webinar already. So please try not to go over time. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks a lot for the welcoming and for the invitation. So I will give you a quick update of what we are doing at EU level in terms of VET and skills. I think you cannot see my screen, trying to fix that. Now, yeah. So this discussion today comes in a very timely moment because as many of you may know, this week is the European Vocational Skills Week. We've been organizing this communication campaign for some years now, and it's about promoting VET attractiveness at all levels. Of course, we do events at EU level, basically through the events that the Spanish presidency is organizing this week, but also the events that you are organizing and VET providers and other key stakeholders. But our aim is that national, regional, and local actors related to VET really take the initiative and try to make VET attractive through different events, info sessions, demonstrations, and so on. So this is a very good moment for us, and we think that it's very important to promote VET at this very moment. You know that one of our biggest concerns nowadays at EU level is about labor shortages, including skill shortages. The latest data says that many occupations present important shortages. We are talking about occupations related to STEM, to ICT, to construction, to services, including healthcare and other care services. And many of those are linked to VET occupations. So many companies are struggling, including SMEs, to hire the people with the right skills, but we still see that adults don't participate in training as regularly as we would like to keep up with the labor market demands. And also when it comes to digital skills, jobs require a high level of digital skills, whereas still we are quite not getting to our target of 80% of adults reaching basic digital skills yet. And this could even be exacerbated by the fact that the green transition is one of our priorities, and some estimates say that many jobs will be created in the coming years, and they will be created in sectors like water supply, sewerage, waste management, construction, or of course, electricity and energy more broadly. So again, many of these occupations are technical, and we need to get the right skills. That's why since May 2023 until May 2024, we are putting all the focus on upskilling and reskilling of the population and change the mindset towards skills, so it becomes the norm. And we are also encouraging member states to implement the policies that we have proposed on the ground with the available funding that it's on the table. And of course, focus on more and more effective investment, on skills relevance, on matching people's aspirations with labor market needs, and to attract talent from abroad when needed. So in this respect, we are organizing many events, many of which specifically related to VET and apprenticeships. We had a high-level event on apprenticeships in June, also to promote work-based learning and to celebrate the 10th year anniversary of our alliance on apprenticeships. We also had the Forum of Vocational Excellence organized by the Netherlands in September, and now the VET Week. But I would like to flag to you an important event that will take place in February 2024 related to VET. It will be the Meet the Champions event that will take place in Brussels and will be about showcasing the skills of Euroskills and WorldSkills champions to inspire young people engaging in VET. So in this context, we are focusing on implementing our 2020 skills agenda actions that are already in place. We are trying to promote upskilling and reskilling of the population through individual learning accounts and micro-credentials. So it has a link also with the modules that you were mentioning above, the European Alliance for Apprenticeships and many other things we will see now. But this year, we have also focused on some specific initiatives to put the focus on the skills needed for the Green Deal through the Green Deal Industrial Plan, and also the proposal of the setting up of net zero academies. We also made some proposals on improving the provision of digital skills in education and training, including on vocational education and training and adult learning. And now very soon we will have a proposal on an update of the learning mobility framework and on recognition of professional qualifications of third country nationals. So I encourage you to be tuned and see what's happening in the next weeks. But when it comes to VET, you know very well that we have our reference, the 2020 Council recommendation on VET. It's about modernizing vocational education and training systems and make them agile, flexible, driving innovation for the digital and green transitions, make them attractive, inclusive and excellent, and also ensure their quality. And these priorities are very much aligned with the policy responses that you were explaining. We have some quantitative objectives in terms of the share of employed graduates reaching 82%. We are almost there. We also believe that work-based learning is essential, and that is why we have also a target, 60%. And we also think learning mobility is very useful when it comes to acquiring other types of skills like transversal skills. So that's why we're aiming at 8%. And this is linked to the upcoming proposal that we will have on learning mobility, where we will try to propose some measures to face the obstacles that learners may have when it comes to mobility. So to implement this recommendation, member states have been devising their plans that they shared with us since last year, and they have ambitious plans. Most of the countries are focusing on equal opportunities and inclusiveness in VET, on upskilling and reskilling of adults, on professional development of school leaders, teachers, and trainers. We just saw in your presentation that this is really a key element, so this is good to see. And engaging with stakeholders and strengthening partnerships. There are other priorities that are also reflected. Around 2/3 of the countries are focusing on modernizing the training programs, diversifying modes of learning, strengthening key competencies, integrating digital skills, reinforcing work-based learning, lifelong guidance, and centers of vocational excellence, whereas half of them are also putting efforts on permeability, skills intelligence, quality assurance systems, mobility, expanding VET programs to levels from 5 to 8, and other activities such as validation and recognition of learning outcomes. And to support member states in these objectives, we have set up a flagship initiative, which are the networks of centers of vocational excellence that we are funding with Erasmus Plus at EU level. These centers are really striving for excellence by acting locally and thinking globally. They are networks of VET centers working together with local businesses, research centers, universities, and other stakeholders at local level, and cooperating with other similar networks in other countries, so they can work together on modernizing VET and make it excellent. So very quickly, that's it from me. Thanks a lot for your interest, and stay tuned for our upcoming activities linked to the European Year of Skills.
Thank you so much, Ana Carrero there from the European Commission. So we've had lots of presentations. Following all of that, I think we have a very good basis to bring in our panelists finally and get their opinions on the future of vocational education and training. So I'm pleased to say I'm now joined by Uliana Musakina, Vice Chairperson from the Association of Finnish Vocational Students, which is SAKI, Adriana Hodak, head of the Intercompany Training Center at the School Center Nova Gorica in Slovenia, Robert Plummer, Senior Advisor from Business Europe, which says it stands up for companies across Europe, Agnes Roman, Senior Advisor from the European Trade Union Confederation, and Oliver Diehl, Deputy Head of the Innovation in Vocational Training Department in Germany's Education and Research Ministry. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us here on this discussion. Uliana Musakina, why don't we start with you? In many ways, you represent the learner's perspective in this forum, at least. You're from the Association of Finnish Vocational Students. So what are your reflections on everything you've just heard? And in your view, are VET schemes in Finland, I guess, fit for purpose?
Duncan, I'm so sorry, I'm having a little issue. Can you give me like 6 minutes? Can I go maybe second or third, if that's okay?
No worries at all. We'll go to someone else first, Uliana, and she's in an airport, in case you're wondering, to the people watching. So let's wait for her to see if she can rejoin us. And let's instead turn to Adriana Hodak, if you're there, Adriana. She is. We're doing better with the technology here. So thank you so much, Adriana. As I mentioned previously, you're head of the Intercompany Training Center in Slovenia at the School Center of Nova Gorica.
Nova Gorica, yes.
That's the pronunciation I couldn't get correct. Apologies.
Okay.
So your reflections then on what we've just heard, and given the challenges, which they've all been talking about, predictions of an AI jobs revolution and so on, are VET schemes changing in Slovenia in response to those challenges?
So I can confirm quite a lot of information that were just shared now. I need to say that as a center of vocational excellence, because we are also one of them, we do try to do our best actually all the time to keep the pace with the constant needs really and changing demands in the labor market. So we do have a lot of collaboration with the labor market, and this collaboration is increasing even more in, I think, that quality than quantity. And this collaboration results in finding out that the skills are changing at extremely high speed, especially since 2016. And that was after the economic crisis. And we don't need to end that. We do need to offer the updated curricula all the time to our learners if you want them to be employable at the labor market. I don't know, we make interviews, discussions with the employers, with the research institutions, especially in the emerging fields or in digital or green or other sectors. We include learners. So to make a match in advance before they enter the labor market. So we try to identify together the skills, and we are looking for different options, how to integrate and how to implement the new skills into the curricula. And as a support tool, we also use from the last year the UNESCO UNEVOC self-reflection tool. It's quite a good actually support. It's about having the self-reflection on the 3 I's, which is identification, integration, and implementation of new skills into the curricula. This is one thing. And another thing that supports us very much is also that we build new networks of individual experts, not only companies. And this network is global, which is very, very useful when it comes to the emerging fields, because they are rare, that kind of experts. And just like to finish with this, that at the same time, I would like to expose that in the past, we were not that much involved in skills identification and integration, especially identification. This was done mostly at the national level by the National Institute of VET, by the Chamber of Commerce or Chamber of Crafts. And actually, the process was quite long, and it still remains quite long. So before they get a new program on to the implementation, and this is not feasible anymore. And this is actually the first challenge that we are issuing now, and we will need to address it, how to make it more responsive, that we come to the updated skills. That's why, because we cannot wait. Therefore, when we have some opportunities, some open curricula, some extracurricular activities, or such as mobilities or hackathons, at that point, we try to be actually as responsive as possible and try to integrate the updated skills. So these are just a few examples. How do we do it?
Adriana, just to come back to you briefly on one of these points, given everything you've said and some of the things you're working on, are VET schemes, in your view, are they going to meet the skills requirements for the future, or do significant changes still need to be brought in?
Yeah, I mean, I believe that we will try to, but I think that we will need to discuss again about the division of the tasks between different VET stakeholders, right? Who is the ownership of what, right? When I was mentioning now these three processes and identification, integration, implementation, I know that we need to align these tasks again according to the new circumstances, this really fast and responsive system. And I think that we will need to address more. And I think that we are asking for really to support us with more flexible systems in the background, also at the policy level. I think that this is going to be very important, because if I compare it with the formal and non-formal education or lifelong trainings, we have much more autonomy in the lifelong trainings. And there we are really offering the most updated courses for the lifelong learners. And I think that this is very important issue now. So it's a lot about the flexibility and autonomy as well at the same time.
Thank you so much.
And professional development, sorry, I forgot to say this, professional development of the teachers and the leadership as well. That's very important.
Well, talking of professional development, is Robert Plummer with us? I know he's been waiting a long time to speak. There he is. Okay, now let's get the business perspective with you, Robert. You're senior advisor at Business Europe. Let's hear your reflection on what other people have said, but also in your view, are current VET programs responding adequately to the needs of the labour market?
Thanks so much, Duncan, and thank you for the invitation. Yes, I think to a good extent they are, but that's not to say that there's not room for improvement, of course, and I think especially in the context that we're in now, in terms of not only significant labour and skills shortages, but within that also we have still persisting issues, as we see it, of structural skills mismatches. So this is all feeding into this issue that companies are experiencing across Europe and across different sectors. I think it has to be said, it's a really widespread issue of labour and skill shortages. And of course, this is all also in the context of the twin transitions, the adaptation to digitalization, to the green transition, the use of new technologies, not only in production processes, but also in service delivery. So it's really issues that are affecting all aspects of the economy. And VET has a crucial role to play in helping to equip workers with the skills that they need, and in turn helping to provide a skilled and competent workforce to our companies in Europe. One of the big issues and the big benefits that we see with VET is the work-based component. I mean, I don't think we can really overstate just how important that is from a company perspective, in terms of the real life training and work experience that takes place within companies. If we think of apprenticeships, for example, in particular, traineeships as well. So this is really of huge added value, and of course not just for the companies in terms of helping to address their skills needs during the course of the training, but also with a medium to longer term perspective, because companies want to train people through VET and then to keep them on as workers, if we think of initial VET, but also in a lifelong learning context as well, in terms of continuous VET. It's also about the upskilling and reskilling dynamics to this as well, which are increasingly important in view of the shortages that I mentioned. So yes, VET is crucial in this respect. It is important that we have that dialogue as well between, indeed, the education and training providers, companies, social partners, so that we have the timely and effective updating of curriculum to reflect these evolving needs and changes to the occupational profiles that we see, especially as a result of digitalization and greening. So that's something that we think is extremely important as part of this.
Robert,
process.
You talked about forgive me for interrupting there. You talked about skills shortages. When you talk about that, is that across the board, or are you seeing an increasing demand for higher technical skills?
It is across the board, I think. We're actually about to release some analysis that we've done following a survey of our member companies precisely on this issue of labour and skills shortages. And we do see that indeed there's this need and demand from employers for, I would say, higher technical skills to an extent, especially around engineering, STEM-related professions, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. But it's not only the highly skilled. We see the need for skills across all levels at the moment, and especially in the STEM and digital related competencies and skills.
Okay, great. Thanks for that very much. Let's turn to another panelist, Agnes Roman. I hope you are there, lurking, hiding somewhere in the darkness. There we are, Senior Advisor for the European Trade Union Confederation. Thank you so much for joining us as well. What would you like to see prioritized? Do we need, for example, to see an increase in the upskilling and reskilling of adults? Where do you think the priority should be?
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you for inviting the European Trade Union Confederation to this meeting, because really the outcomes of the education at the grants report is important for the workers' trade unions. But we see that digital and green transition changes the role of jobs and tasks, but we really think that this should not mean making workers redundant or replacing them with artificial intelligence and new technologies, because trade unions really advocate that just transition should be used as an opportunity to create quality jobs with good working conditions in all sectors and regions. I checked that the report, and it has a very important outcome. 20% of adults are low qualified. They earn less. They have high risk of poverty and social exclusion. And we are really concerned that these people will suffer the most from job transitions, while they really need urgently effective support to access trainings. But what we also see is that there are major inequalities in training provisions. For example, in the EU, companies offer less or no trainings to female workers or workers who are above age 55, because their jobs are the most routine. And we see that those are getting more trainings who are the younger, male, and highly qualified workers. So we really think that there should be better access to all workers, equal access to free and quality training during the working time. And the other interesting outcomes of the OECD report is linking education to poverty, employability. And this is very important, but initial formal education really indeed needs to prepare young people with basic skills and key competencies to make an essential basis to start life and labor market. But we really think that it is in addition to that, the company's responsibility to ensure quality and inclusive work-related trainings to their workers, including newly recruited workers and freshly graduated too. And we really think that the OECD report could put a more emphasis on the work of companies, but also social partners on workers' trainings. Because there is another problem, We think that workers' training and access to workers' training should be a right to all workers, so that to ensure that regardless of their contractual situation or sectors or size of companies they work in, they have the really access to trainings, and collective agreements play a key role, but we have in the EU the European Pillar of Social Rights. And we are saying that because in many sectors, for example, in the public services, workers have to pay the professional development courses outside of their working hours. For example, nurses, doctors, and teachers, and this is not acceptable to have such inequalities of accessing trainings. And concerning the skills shortages and labor shortages and mismatches, we think that labor shortages are not only skills related. In fact, many jobs are attractive, not attractive because they are low paid, the working conditions are bad, workers have seasonal or precarious contracts, their health and safety are not protected. And in the EU, these are mostly, those are persistent shortage professions who are nurses, teachers, construction workers, welders, truck drivers. And we really think that it's important to provide a very strong message to governments to really make these professions attractive. And it is very welcome that the OECD, for example, is discussing about teacher shortages in the document. And really
Agnes, just to pick up on one of the things you mentioned there. You mentioned nurses, for example, saying that they have to pay for their own training. Obviously, governments and businesses as well who might insist on their employees paying for training, they'll say there are huge costs involved. So what are trade unions doing to try to change that situation? Do you think it's actually realistic proposing that those kinds of trainings are always going to be free for the person who wants to do it?
Well, look, trainings are related to quality of services. If a company would like to provide quality service, it's important to improve the knowledge of the workers. So, of course, these are all related. But I think, and I also would like to react to one of the previous speakers concerning social dialogue, because what we really need to practice is a strong social dialogue with employers' organizations, with trade unions. Really, democratic governance on education systems and skills strategies are essential to overcome the problems, for example, of the cost and benefits of trainings. And there should be really no excuse for governments of not involving social partners, especially the workers' trade unions, in designing and managing trainings for workers. So really think that, for example, the Education at a Glance next year could also highlight the importance of social dialogue concerning skill strategies, vet policy development.
Thank you so much for that, Agnes. I'm going to try to turn back to Uliana Musakina, who I saw her camera flash up. I know she's been at the airport. She's trying to travel somewhere. Uliana, can you hear us? It looks like you might be in a taxi, which is a very exciting moment for an OECD webinar, I have to say. If this broadcast manages to continue without any technical faults, then it will be, well, quite extraordinary. You can hear us okay, yes?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Excellent. Yes, we can. So let's get your reflections. If you've managed to hear in on some of what our guests have been saying, from your perspective, you're from the Association of Finnish Vocational Students. What would you like to see change, both now and in the future, to support students more in vocational education?
Well, first of all, to support VET students, you need to include students into decision making, because it's unfortunately very common to make decisions for the students and not hear in their perspective at all. That would be my first and most important point. Second of all, somebody in the chat mentioned that there's kind of a stigma that the VET is not enough or not good enough education system for people, and the university would be the better one, and after VET you must go somewhere else. So there's a lack of appreciation of VET among our society. So that's one issue that we also need to solve. We also need to advocate for VET students who are currently in the VET, and as we're speaking about the attractiveness of VET, we also need to make a picture in the society for people to be, yes, that's something I want to do, or that's something that I want my friend, my child, whoever to attend, and that's also a valid form of education. So that would be my second point of that. So and of course we also need to include, because in VET, because there's practical training included, we need to ensure that while people are in the practical training, they are still counted as students and not as employees, and they still get the same benefits, the same care that they are provided while they're studying, like traditionally in class, I would say.
Okay, thank you for that. And look, the signal's just about good enough. One quick follow-up question. You mentioned perception there of VET students. How do you change the perception, which was sometimes a negative perception about vocational education changing? What do you think needs to happen to change that perception?
Well, first of all, we need more representation in the media, because right now the academical education is the #1 perception of the education. So practical skills and opportunity to get practical skills should be more, well, if I may say so, mainstream. So it's not something like that. It's not should be not a second choice that, oh, okay, somebody didn't get a part in a. Yeah. So yeah. Sorry about that.
I think we're losing you, Ileana. Unfortunately, we're going to have to. I'll have to cut you off there because the signal's not so great. And
that's fine. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Look, thank you. It's really fascinating speaking to you, and good luck to get to wherever you're going to. I hope your journey is a smoother than the signal from your mobile phone. Let's cross now to our final panelist, Oliver Diehl from Germany's Federal Ministry of Education and Research. Oliver, thank you for being so patient. Thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, you're from Germany's Federal Ministry of Education and Research. From your perspective, what are the big challenges that Germany is facing in this area?
Well, I would like to maybe team up with Uliana, because what she has said is touching a little bit my heart, coming from a traditional TVET system. And I would applaud to her, saying that, of course, a TVET education is absolutely a fulfilling way of starting a career and not only entering the labor market, but staying there and going up the ladder if you really want to. So, but it's true, the lack of appreciation is something that we want to tackle. We have been working on different issues targeting the mindset of people, as OECD numbers, and Abel was quite impressive with his presentation at the beginning, to show how vocational and or upper secondary education compares to tertiary and university education. Of course, I would say there's old challenges which we have to tackle over the last 20 years. And as a, let's say, traditional vet country, we are still able to provide for more than 500,000 vet apprentices places in the industrial sector, in the handicraft sector each year, which I find is quite a big effort. But part of the new challenges, and here is where maybe we have to change or reconsider some of our old truths, is that what do we do with the change of the demographic change and the technological change? Two things that are concerning us, and we're trying to work with these challenges, is first, we still work the core business, which is the dual system. I think well known, I don't have to repeat what that is. It's the integration of work and education at the same time. But I think I may call it the periphery, higher vet, maybe modular vet, and international vet. Some of these issues have become more prominent in our thinking, and as you have had already the social partners' voice here, I would say that we have to work better and also quicker with the social partners. Germany's vet system is a consensus-oriented system. As a ministry, we cannot decree top-down towards the social partners. We work with them, and of course, as I say, the operational mode of the vet system has been a little slow over time. So I think mindset is the first issue that we're working on, and second is speed and agility. So that's my contribution. Thanks.
Well, okay, we can leave it there actually, probably, because we are very close to time. And I want to say a big thank you to all of the panelists who've joined us and the speakers as well. And also thank you to all the people who have made comments and left questions in the chat, which unfortunately we just don't have time for. But Suho Yu's given a comment, you know, Dominic, Jude, lots of people from different countries, Luxembourg, Canada, Morocco. So thank you for everyone attending this webinar. It really is very much appreciated. I think it's clear from what everyone has been saying that vocational programs are going to become increasingly crucial to meeting the demands for skilled workers right across the globe, with AI and the prediction that millions of jobs could soon become automated. The importance of vocational training is likely only to increase further. So this debate, the debate we've just been having, and the policy decisions which will emerge over the coming years to grapple with these issues are going to have a real impact on the way the world works and, of course, people themselves. So you can find out lots more online about this topic, the OECD Education at a Glance report, and also other OECD work on this subject on vocational education and training. Just go to the OECD website. Thank you to everyone who attended this webinar. Thank you to our speakers, Abel Schumann from the OECD, Malgorzata Kukzara, an OECD analyst as well from the European Commission, Anna Carrero, and of course to our panelists as well, Uliana, Adriana, Robert, Agnes, and Oliver. Thank you so much, all of you, for your time. Please do join us again for another OECD webinar soon. All the best.
Bye-bye.